It's OTA day for Marvel Snap gamers, and as promised, Second Dinner has delivered us a larger than average set of changes. We've got 6 nerfs, 6 buffs. Let's go ahead and dive on into the details of what's going to be going on in Marvel Snap. We kick off our nerfs with not 1, not 2, but 3 different changes aiming to take target at the most popular Thanos decks that have been dominating everything from the Golden Gauntlet to terrorizing the ladder that we're all playing on. Second Dinner actually shared a bit of information that surprised me a little bit, saying that Strange Supreme has often been one of the better performing cards inside of the Thanos shell. It's always interesting to me when my anecdotal experience is divorced from the data that they see, and I think taking a point of power off of him will create more close games that can swing cube equity out of the Thanos player's favor. Time Stone is losing its draw a card specifically, with Second Dinner indicating that this has actually been the most powerful stone inside of Thanos's kit, and I can see that definitely being the case. In particular, allowing Thanos to be played as a 5 energy card means that you can spend your energy on the 6th turn of the game in a flurry of tech cards, getting both points from the Mad Titan earlier and then a bunch of disruption, kicking over what your opponent has going on as the game ends, making it very difficult for a lot of opposing decks to keep up. Sam Wilson's shield is losing its point of power, making it a 0/0. This is a nerf with the card to its left here in Strange Supreme, only going to give him +2 now. It also means your deck has less priority early, and it's just less stats in Sam's kit overall. I think this change is fine. Sam's a pretty omnipresent card that's very powerful, and I think every deck that's currently playing Sam still wants to be playing him for all of the powerful synergies that he brings to the game, but he'll just be a little bit weaker, which is fine because he was already pretty powerful to begin with. Next up, we have what is technically a side grade to Hazmat, but is definitely a power reduction overall, taking it from a 2/2 up to a 3/3. Second Dinner notes that while Thanos has been making most people upset on social media and other places, the Afflict deck is actually in close contention for being one of the strongest in the metagame. I don't think this really surprises me. Every time I've played with and against the Ajax deck, it's incredibly powerful, with the exception that Luke Cage is obviously an incredibly powerful tech card against it, meaning it tends to have a pretty polarized matchup spread. When your opponent has Luke and they're smart about playing it out on the last turn of the game, you often can't win, but when they don't have that really key card, it's tough for them to keep up. Second Dinner notes by increasing the energy cost of Hazmat, they're aiming to make it a little bit more difficult for Ajax decks to be able to play out both their own Luke and Hazmat over the course of the game, demanding a little bit more energy investment for the big payoff that this archetype is ultimately getting, with things like Diamondback and Ajax really punishing your opponents for having afflicted cards. I think this change is fine. Honestly, I think the Afflict decks overall would be more healthy and interesting pieces if Hazmat was weaker overall, so you could keep up with them without Luke Cage. Their matchup spread was a little bit less polarized. I also like that Second Dinner is going out of their way to not only create churn in bringing down Thanos, but also looking at the metrics of everything at the top and being like, okay, let's take a couple points off here and these other things that are already really strong, so that way there isn't just a new dominant thing rising up to the top immediately from stuff that's already known. In a similar vein to the Hazmat change, we have a Sauron rework, with the note that this has also been one of the top performing decks in smaller sample sizes. It's one that I've called out in deck roundups on this channel while going over untapped data in the past. For those that aren't familiar, it was a Sauron deck that explicitly was not playing Shuri and often ended in a flurry of tech cards with things like Cosmo and Juggernaut alongside Starbrand on that final turn of the game. So the Sauron rework is interesting. It means you're going to have to work around the drawbacks of these detrimental ongoing cards more frequently, which will make playing something like Enchantress and Zero more important in that shell than ever. But in your absolute best draws, where you have this card on 1 and you don't have any of your detrimental ongoing cards in hand, it's technically better than it was previously, being both more energy efficient and adding more points to the board. Overall, I think these type of changes are some of the best ones that Second Dinner makes. While the card's assuredly a little bit weaker overall, it's weaker in a way that's just different, as opposed to it being strictly worse than it previously was. Our last nerf is shaving a point of power off Makari, whose second dinner notes has crept up in terms of power level, especially in decks like Surfer, where she adds free points to the board that you then get to lean into even further. An amusing note is this is actually the stat line she was initially set to release at before second dinner did an emergency buff before she hit her spotlight, so it's funny to see them land back at a spot where they had previously been in their testing. I don't really have any thoughts on this change. I think Surfer's been a solid deck for a while. I think this is another kind of nominal nerf to kind of the other things at the top of the metagame underneath Thanos to create a little bit more churn and uncertainty as we try and figure out what's going to be good in this post-OTA shift. Moving along to our buffs, I'm never one to bury a lead, so we've got Storm going back to her original stat line of 3-2 here with a big asterisk next to the first location that she creates, the flooding. There is a functional change where the flooding location now is no longer a combo with Legion as a card. Essentially, when you Legion the flooding, Legion's newly created flooding locations are not going to inherit the same timing, meaning they're not all three going to close up at the same time, and the newly created Legion flooding locations will close up at the end of the following turn. This means if you storm and then play Legion immediately afterwards, while the location you initially stormed at is locked for the rest of the game, the other two give both players one more window to play things out at them. It is worth noting that Storm into War Machine into Legion should still combo from my understanding here, because if you War Machine Legion into the location that's already flooded, it's going to flood the others and lock them out for the 6th turn, where you'll still have War Machine to play, but that combo explicitly requires 3 cards on curve 3, 4, 5, which is fairly unlikely, as opposed to Storm on 4 into Legion, which was a 1-2 card combo that was a lot cleaner to set up. I personally am excited to have Storm back, as she was one of my favorite cards that helped mitigate location variance in Cerebro 2, one of my all-time favorite Marvel Snap decks. Speaking of Cerebro, that deck's namesake is also getting a solid buff in this OTA as well, going back to a 3 cost, but now giving plus 3 power to your highest cards. This increase means that a Cerebro plus a Mystique Cerebro inside of Cerebro 2 will allow you to have a bunch of 8 power things, meaning you still get to duck a Shang, but you can stack 32 points of power organically into a single lane. This, in tandem with the return of Storm to the deck, could hopefully mean that it can at least be fringe playable again when it hasn't been that way in a really long time. Hercules is getting an important distinction change here. Instead of hitting away any card that moves to his location for the first time in a turn, he's only going to hit away your cards that move there. This means if your opponent has something like a Sam Wilson Shield or a Jeff the Baby Landshark or something else, they can't use up your Hercules. It also means in a move mirror match, you will never be enabling their payoffs instead of your own. I'm somewhat skeptical that this card will be good enough inside of move decks even with this change, but at least at a minimum, it means you'll be able to plan for it and your opponent will be less disruptive against it in the games where it's playing out. Finally, we got a couple of nominal 1-point power buffs to cards that are underperforming. I think both of these changes are fine. Annihilus hasn't been a metagame powerhouse in a long time, and all of the best Electro decks in the game are getting rid of his body in some way, shape, or form, so making him a little bit better in the games where he has to unfortunately stick around for you seems like a fine thing to be doing. All in all, this feels like an incredibly solid 8 out of 10 or maybe even 9 out of 10 OTA. They took a good crack at the top deck that everybody was sick of seeing. They also toned down a few other things that in their back end had really powerful metrics, so it's a little bit less clear what's going to be rising to the top in the power vacuum that Thanos could leave behind. They also gave a pretty sizable buff to both Storm and Cerebro, giving us room to revisit an older beloved archetype at a new power level, and they also sprinkled in their handful of +1 buffs to things that are underserved. I personally am going to be spending plenty of time playing Cerebro 2 and other Storm decks again, as they are some of my favorites to play in Snap. I would love to hear in the comments down below what your thoughts are on the OTA as always, and if you enjoyed my musings, make sure you smash the like button on this video. If you happen to be new to Marvel Snap or this channel, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the upcoming content, such as the decks roundup that we will be doing once we have a chance for Untapped to populate some data after all of these changes have been live for a little while. I appreciate everybody making it all the way through to the end the end of the video, and I hope your next snap pack is an excellent one.